when you spoke about all that, I honestly had no idea about that, but I'm a words person because of my past in writing and composing. And I found that just fascinating, so it kind of brought me into a new realm. And I was also into Kent Hovind, and when you talked about those words, I went on to Kent Hovind's Wikipedia. Unfortunately, I'm referencing a Wikipedia site here,
Hmm.
but it was so interesting because in reference to what you said about the birth certificate and the social security card and all this stuff, and then the words being involved with that, I read his page totally different. Because my dad had said something about, he was in prison, and I was like, what's he in prison for, So I read it, and the choice of words to the average Joe, you don't really get what's going on. But when you read it after understanding how, legalese and all these different things that are in Black's Law Dictionary and Ballantyne's Law Dictionary and the different things that mean different things that we definitely don't get, it makes a lot more sense because it says, after being indicted, Hovind claimed incomprehension to the charges, telling the court, I still don't understand what I'm being charged for and who is charging me. Now, since I've read that, initially back in the winter, they've definitely edited it because I remember them speaking more about, or there being more information on that, saying that they had to bring more people up there, and he still said that he didn't understand it, so they're making him look like he's just totally incompetent, you know what I'm saying? But he knows what he's saying, you know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then it says, Magistrate Miles Davis asked Hovind if he spoke English, to which Hovind responded to some degree. And then then they basically, indict him, and Hovind stated later, he said, Hovind stated that he did not recognize the government's right to try him on tax fraud charges. And the word recognize is so important too, as well as understand, amongst so many other words. But I just want to thank you for pointing that out because it opened my whole world up.
That's right. When you say to a judge, yes, Your Honor, I understand, what you're saying is, I agree to stand under the rules of this court. So the moment you say, yes, I understand, you've just lost your argument. So Hovind's tactic appears to be dull, but it actually is a genius tactic because what it indicates is an unwillingness to comply with the court's kangaroo court's rulings. Now, Hovind is a very dangerous man because he speaks the truth.
Yeah, and that really is interesting because, since learning about just that in regards, because Daniel was a big Kent Hovind fan, and when I pointed that out to him,
I loved it in
he
high
was
school.
he was a huge fan growing up, and I kind of just recently was turned on to Hovind. And Daniel was like, well, he was, there's tax fraud. He's got to render unto Caesar. And I said, well, check this out, And it made so much more sense. And we were just like, this is so real, And it's interesting that, prior and after 9/11, the people that were calling out the New World Order, the truthers, so to speak, like Bill Cooper, Kent Hovind, Fritz Springmeier, John Todd, and Randall N. Baer were all completely silenced in some way, 3 of which were killed.
That's right. And if you want to connect the dots, just go to Google Images and type in income tax building. I think you're going to be surprised.
Okay.
Because it is loaded with Illuminati symbology.
Yeah. So I feel like that is such a huge topic, the birth certificate, and I don't want to cover it anymore in this interview. But are you going to be getting a little more in depth in any of your new films about that?
Maybe if I can find some clear documentation on the subject, because
Okay.
I only speak on what I can document.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people have opinions, but they have very little proof.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't have proof, I don't talk about it.
And there's so many gray areas like corporate personhood, where you take a word and you change the word person to fit a business or whomever to describe a business.
That's right. And on the topic of meanings of words, If you want to amuse yourself or fascinate yourself, get your hands on an original Webster's dictionary and just look up the meanings of words. It is amazing. Of course, Noah Webster was a Christian, and everything is defined in terms of Christian ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the words have been changed. If I told you 40 years ago that I'm feeling quite gay today, you would have had not a single issue with what I just said. But of course, gay doesn't mean the same thing that it does now, right?
Right.
Right.
And in the topics of words, as you said, how we've said how these words are changed. It's so interesting going into, you come from the university background, and every one of these professions, well, I shouldn't say every one because I can't document that, but a lot of these professions are rooted in, paganism. Even the profession, the name, like psychology, is based off of the logos of psyche, and you have Gaia and geology, and you have what was the other one? I can't even remember what the other
Meteorology.
one was. Meteorology is Meteora, and it's unbelievable.
Well, when you get your degree, like your Masonic degree, you stand up and you are given a parchment, and you are on the square with your mortarboard cap. And of course, you eat 4 square meals a day, and you are taught only what you need to know to function like an automaton in a well-controlled society.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite sad to see how the entire graduation ceremony is based on Masonic traditions. And the whole legal system is based on Masonic traditions. The whole act of, placing your arm up in the air at a 90-degree angle, that's a Masonic signal.
Yeah. Moving on from that, I don't know how much longer you really want to talk to us here, so we don't want to keep you from whatever's going on.
Well, we'll get into one more set of questions and we'll call it a night.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to cover the 501c3 incorporation of churches, and in your film, at the very beginning, by the way, I've written everything down here. You've grouped the New World Order / Illuminati into 6 different groups, and I'm assuming, because I've heard you say in different interviews, that there are hundreds of denominations of the New World Order. And I don't see 100 yet on this page, but I can only imagine when you talk about the Masons and you go into, you talk about secret, clubs or secret societies or whatever. I mean, I think about the Knights Templar, and I think about me playing shows in Arlington Heights, Illinois, back in the early 2000s at the Knights of Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting. Like that was a place, that was a hot spot for bands to play, to rent that hall out. And now I'm thinking, well, who are the Knights of Columbus, right?
Oh yeah, I mean that is just Catholic Freemasonry.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, does it translate into like the Salvation Army, for instance? Because I'm noticing that the Masons like to ring the Salvation Army bell.
Well, we need to be very, very careful about that, because I don't connect dots that don't have connections.
Okay.
And unless I have specific proof that one thing is connected to another, I won't talk about it. For example, just in my research this week, I have documentation where the founder of the Red Cross in the Soviet Empire was driving around with a bank draft from JP Morgan of several $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that is how the communists, one of the ways that the communists in Russia were funded. They were funded through the Red Cross from American banksters. And so I can stand up and say, look, here is the draft. Here's the money transfer. It's got this guy's signature on it. This guy was the founder of the Red Cross in the Soviet Union. A is connected to C through B.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I do. I connect the dots based on actual documentation. And a lot of people just, they don't want to see it. But you know what? I tell people who are skeptics, look, you tell me, I won't believe it until I see it.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, you won't see it until you believe it.
Very true.
So back on to what I was going to ask you here, with your groupings here of the Illuminati and the New World Order, you have the religious group, the educational group, intelligence group, political group, banking and money group, and secret societies group. And on the religious group, I don't know much about the World Council of Churches and all these, I haven't really touched this whole aspect. But can you tell us a little bit about the 501c3 incorporation and maybe the relation to the World Council of Churches and what's really going on in America?
Okay. The 501c3 designation is, of course, a tax exemption. And a lot of churches would be up the creek financially if it wasn't for that 501c3 designation. They just wouldn't have enough income. So I find it hilarious that in your nation, which values free speech so much that you can't make any kind of quote-unquote political statement in a church if you want to keep your 501c3 designation. So right there, you do not have the freedom of speech that you think you have. So you do not have a anti-war movement within the church. And on that topic, I say, you know what? America was founded by renegade congregations who, on the Battle of Lexington Green, if my American history doesn't fail me right at this moment, that churches literally organized themselves against the British. And the American tradition of the pastor standing outside the church or in the entrance to the church at the end of a service goes back to the pastors during revolutionary times being the first people out the door to make sure the British weren't aiming guns at them. Right. So I tell people, you want to preach to me Romans 13, that's fine. But America wouldn't exist if it weren't for the renegade congregations who rose up against the British. So know your own history. Know how you're being controlled through tax designation. It's all about the money. And 501c3 designation is a Rothschild creation or Rockefeller creation. And so he who controls the gold controls the world, right? It's the world's golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules.
Right. And how does that play into the World Council of Churches? Because I really don't know much about the World Council of Churches.
The Rockefellers, in addition to pushing for 501c3 designation, also established the World Council of Churches, just as they established the United Nations. Mm-hmm. And the entire goal of the World Council of Churches is to promote ecumenicism.
Right.
And so the Rockefellers are absolute geniuses because as you promote, cross-cultural understanding, whatever that means, you're going to water down your theology. So the Rockefellers just set up a structure and they let churches fall into that structure in the interest of, peace, love, and harmony.
Yeah.
So the Rockefellers don't have to be behind every conspiracy in a formal sense. They can just set up an organization and let it perpetuate the goals of the Rockefellers without the organization even being aware that it's doing so.
Mm-hmm. Now, just to bring this kind of full circle to the average Joe who's, watching Fox News with the 501c3 tax-exempt organizations, let's just bring this in context with the Boy Scouts, what's going on with that whole situation.
The Boy Scouts were originally, if I'm not mistaken, founded by a Freemason.